dated 2/14, sheet 2A. It was the alternate.
Yeah, I think I closed it too fast, but yes, it was the alternate plan, so whatever that date is would be correct.
Attorney Shansky, does that conclude the applicant's information presentation this evening?
It suspends it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'll go with suspense. You have your hand raised, Attorney Ainsworth?
I do, sir. Yes. I'd like to ask some questions, and since I can't ask them directly, I'll ask them through the chair. Thank you. First, I'd like to see the site plan that was just pulled up to address a point that was absolutely hammered by applicant's counsel, Mr. Walsh, regarding a certain point that I need to correct. Okay, so looking at the two-story house at the bottom left of this, which is of course 38 Howard Avenue, you see directly across from the K in building setback line, you'll see an elevation which is 41.3, and you'll see the corner of the house is 41.9, which is higher than 41.3, which means there's a slope from 41.9 to 49.3, which goes directly toward the wall. You'll see that further forward where it says paver patio, and then you go straight up and you see 41.8 and 41.5 further down. There is a slope from the patio toward the retaining wall. So I would like to ask a question, which is, does removing any of the block require, at any point along the wall, require one to walk on the or enter the property of the of 34 Howard Avenue, because it's on the line for almost the entire distance, and wondering if there's any construction detail that indicates how they're going to be able to do that from their side. That's one question. I'll ask the questions and then you can relay them. Do we have a cross section of this wall to know how it was built underneath? Because what we've seen is some photographs, and we of a certain stage of the construction, but we haven't seen all of it, and we don't really know what the cross section of the existing wall is, nor do we have a cross section of what the proposed wall is, because that would tell us a little bit about the soil and what layers of soil were proposed. I think had this been properly permitted, we would perhaps know that. Let's see. Now, let's see. I'd like to ask the question. So when the water permeates, now we've heard a lot of testimony regarding the water permeating through the patio and going into this gravel detention area, and that there's ledge beneath it. So the question is, the water gets detained and gets placed into this detention area. And I think Mr. Preddy said the water goes down and then gets held there. But if it got held there permanently, as every rainstorm happened, it would just fill up. So where does it go? Does it go down? Because now it's been slowed down and gravity, I believe, takes it down. So the question is, does it go down to the bottom and then there are crevices in the rock? And so would it go into the crevices that are filled with gravel? Or does it somehow magically disappear? Because they said before the patio was built, they were on ledge and it has no permeability before. That was what they said. So if it has no permeability, where's the water go? It must travel along the ledge. And if you are detaining it, the water that used to run back is now detained in the area where it is. And now there's more water at the top of the property near where those crevices are. I'd like to have an answer to that. Then there was, there's no sediment transport was, I think, the statement. Is there any nutrient transport? Because now you've got an impervious surface where there's no remediation of nutrients, which are now going to fall on the patio. Are those going to be infiltrated and then remediated through gravel? Gravel, I don't think, has much remediation capacity. So is that getting discharged now down the slope? Because we removed, they said they scraped the soil and the grass off of their ledge. So now you don't have any remediation of nutrients at that point. Where does that happen?
This is Commissioner Bascom, let me interrupt. You've got some questions here. I would think at this point, given the length that we've had this on the docket, that you would have brought in experts of your own to put on the record the evidence if you feel differently, as opposed to just asking questions.
I thought that the law allowed me a right of cross-examination as an intervener, but if I'm not allowed to do that, I won't. But
the commission listens to the applicant, and then if there is a different set of criteria that somebody feels is appropriate for the commission to consider, then they bring that expert so that there's a balance of background information, experience, etc. And then the commission has to make a decision as to which one rules the day. And I don't see that happening here.
Oh, no.
Frederick in the wetland agent, I would just like to clarify, as an environmental intervener, they do have the right to cross-examine, but also the point made relative to expert testimony does stand. But I just want to make sure the commission does understand this is a little bit different than just general public input at a public hearing. They haven't intervened and been granted intervener status, and they do have the right to cross-examine. However, if there's expert testimony on hand, and certainly having expert testimony to back up or counteract what has been presented to the commission could be beneficial to their argument.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so does that mean I get to ask the questions, or I don't? Because I have experts here as well.
I'd like to hear from the experts.
I'm not certain that answers the question, because if this is, I don't, you've heard me say this before, but if this is going to end up in an appeal, I need to know the answer.
Jamie Frederick.
Commissioner Boda, sorry, Jamie, I think it would be helpful so far I have 4 questions. I anticipate that the applicants are also listening to the questions, as they're likely to be volleyed back. And hopefully, they're also being recorded as part of this meeting. So I would encourage you to continue with your questions, but also know that we are waiting to hear from the experts that you have as well. And I know that you just had an opportunity to start. It's almost 9 o'clock, and just want to keep going.
I perfectly well understand. We heard a lot of testimony, some from the experts, some from the lawyer. I'm just asking questions. But look, I'm going to follow the rules. If you tell me I should move on to my experts, I will move on to my experts.
You have additional questions that you didn't get to yet ask. I do not want you to think that you cannot.
Jamie,
if you have experts, I would also like to hear from them.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. We have town council present. This seems like something that would be perfect for them to weigh in on. If we want to ask if town council has anything to add.
Attorney Yanuskowicz, you want to weigh in here?
I will, for the record, Bill Yanuskowicz, Benner Saltzman, and Town Council. I believe that Jamie Frederick is correct. I believe that under the environmental intervener laws in Connecticut, it's fairly clear that an environmental intervener has the ability to present testimony and cross-examine witnesses. So I think it's important for purposes of the record that I reiterate what Jamie said and what I think I just heard Commissioner Boda say, which is you are free to cross-examine the witnesses Attorney Ainsworth. I think the chairman has also indicated a desire to hear from your experts. So I know it's late, but I think we've got to abide by what we know to be the effect of the intervenor law, which is fairly clear to me, at least.
Just brief.
Floor is still yours, Attorney Ainsworth.
Excuse me, sir?
The floor is still yours, it sounds like.
Thank you, sir. And just a brief clarification, do I get to ask those questions through the chair or directly of the witnesses?
Well, I think we're both hearing your questions as they come up. So helping to move this along, I don't know that we need to two-step this.
Fair enough, sir. Thank you. All right. So, Mr. Dunn, was there ever an engineer on site to review the work as it was being done to determine whether the materials being installed were installed according to good engineering practice?
You're muted.
I don't think that was one of the
You're
questions
muted.
that were asked earlier, but it's a different question.
Was this design sketch a hand-drawn sketch by the landscaper for the design of the wall? And then the next question would be, was there a design for the second phase when it got raised? And then how did that come about that the wall got altered in the plans and there wasn't a design plan for it? And so will we have enough excavation behind that wall to determine whether the soil was properly compacted, whether there were geotextile fabric was placed in all of the areas, whether their footings were continuous, and whether the pinning was continuous or whether it's just in spots? Because the photographs only seem to indicate that they were in some areas, not all. I'd also like to know when the footings were put in, was gravel backfilled behind there, and did the gravel go into the crevices? Were the crevices below the wall excavated, or were they just filled with gravel? We don't know the answer to that yet.
I would be happy to answer all your questions, but if we could just have one question at a time.
Okay. So, Mr. Dunn, I'll start with the last one first, because that's the one I remember. The crevices, there are crevices in the patio, right? Oh, excuse me, in the ledge, correct?
If I may, I mean, I want to facilitate this.
That question's not for you. This is my examination.
The questions keep changing.
So. Oh, no, the question's very easy. Are there crevices in the ledge?
I don't know.
Okay, so you didn't see any crevices.
I can't answer that. I don't know if there were crevices in the ledge. I know there was ledge. I know I drilled and pinned an epoxy rebar in the ledge. I poured concrete footing on the ledge.
Okay.
But I can't go into detail about crevices.
Okay. All right. So then there was testimony earlier about there was a photograph showing a number of pieces of ledge. Was there some need to break apart or loosen the ledge face in order to prepare the site?
No, whatever ledge was there, we just cleaned off the existing ledge. We drilled into the existing ledge and then poured concrete over the existing ledge. So we never changed any ledge. We just poured concrete for a flat surface over the existing ledge.
Okay. And did you remove the soil off of the ledge before doing that?
On our side of the property?
On Yeah, on Charlie's property, we cleaned off the ledge in order to get a good adhesion there. Of course we did. If we poured concrete over a barrier of topsoil or sand or anything, there would be no, it wouldn't adhere to that. So you have to clean that off so you have a good contact with the concrete and the ledge.
Okay. And did you remove the soil from other parts of the ledge within the patio area?
Where there was no
I'm not-
concrete poured?
No, where there was no concrete poured, we didn't clean any ledge off.
Okay. Okay. Are there any perforated drain pipes behind the wall that goes perpendicular to the stream?
No,
I guess maybe the easier question is, where are there any perforated pipes underneath the patio area?
no,
Okay, are there any PVC drain pipes? Like I see there are ones in the wall where they come through the wall. Where do those pipes go back from there? How far back?
It goes underneath the concrete footing that I poured. So that corner of the wall is the absolute lowest part of that structure. So in my mind, if any water was going to sit behind this wall, it would sit in the very lowest part. So I put a 2-inch, which is a very small pipe. It's not a 4-inch, not a 6-inch. It's a 2-inch piece of conduit just from the front to back of the footing to relieve any water if any water did sit behind the wall.
Okay, so the pipes in the photograph where before the wall is constructed, but you see the footings are there or the pins are there. There are 2 PVC pipes. Those are actually the pipes that are there now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And what is the kind of geotextile fabric that was put in? What's the brand?
I don't have the brand. I buy all my material from Site One Landscapes. It's a nationally owned hardscape company. Whatever they carry, I use.
Okay. And are there manufacturer's specifications for the installation of that product?
I'm sure there are. Yeah, there are. Yeah.
And did you follow them?
Yes.
And what were those specifications that you followed?
I can't recall off the top of my head.
Okay. Okay, so at any time during the construction, was there an engineer present to observe or oversee the work that was being done?
No.
And in any of the design plans, was there an engineer who contributed to those designs?
No.
Okay. And did you remove any soil or did any of your contractors use any of the native soils as backfill behind the wall? Did you move it around anywhere?
It's possible.
Okay. Well, and when you say it's possible, what do you mean by that? I'm not trying to understand.
Well, I mean, if there was some topsoil, we probably would put that up in a corner and use it, as topsoil when we were done with the project.
Okay, so that would be the topsoil that was on the ledge before the project started.
It was topsoil that was on the property that we put aside to use in the planting beds when we were done with the project, correct?
Sure, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, that clarified that. Okay, now, is the footing continuous beneath the entire wall, or is it only in sections where you thought it might be needed?
It's pretty continuous, if I could remember correctly. Yeah, it pretty much runs the whole length of the wall.
All right. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Preddy. I assume he's still here.
Why don't we assume he's still here? And there we
There he is.
go.
I see him. So Mr. Preddy, when you weren't on site prior to the wall being built, were you?
No, when we were contracted, the wall was already up.
Okay. And so, and you haven't excavated any portion of the patio to determine what's actually beneath it, have you?
No, my knowledge of what's beneath the patio is all from the photographs and Mr. Dunn's testimony.
And all of your reports were written before those photographs from Mr. Dunn were submitted, correct?
I had met with Mr. Dunn and talked with him, so I had a general idea what was going on, but then the photographs just confirmed later.
Yeah. When did you first meet with him?
It was early on when we were first hired. We had to, when this first came up, we were hired to help with the permitting. We had to perform a survey, and that was in progress, and I think it was during that time. So it was prior to the first submission to Wetlands.
So what happens to the water that hits the patio and permeates into the patio? Where does it go?
So it goes into the soil. I mean, the soil does dry out in between rainstorms, and some of it gets held in the soil, and some of it probably goes into some various gaps in the ledge that probably go in many different directions, because this backyard was shaped like a turtle prior. So they're having not seen it, I can't say, but that's my guess.
Okay. And there was a photograph that was shown earlier that showed the area between the two properties, and there's some fairly substantial crevices, I mean, that are noticeable, visible to the naked eye. They're several inches wide. Do you recall seeing those at any time when you were there?
When I was there, there was still soil in that area between the wall and the house. The only time I've seen the area between was the videos that were shown last time. Since the soil's been stripped, I should say.
Fair enough. And all right, so when you did your calculations on the well, actually, you said something about the soil would dry out. Are you saying that the water will evaporate under the patio?
Yeah, I mean, the soil always does dry out eventually. Even if you had a bird bath on a pavement, eventually that would dry out.
So even though it's capped with stone, it would evaporate?
Yeah, that's correct. Just like when you have a heavy rain event and the water table rises close to the surface, and then after a few days of no rain, the water table would recede, the soil starts to dry out.
Right. When the water table recedes, it's actually going down, not up. It's not evaporating away.
But the soil's still wet, and it would have to evaporate. I mean, we're getting a little far afield here, but
right. But when you're talking about storage of water after a big storm, the volume of that water would travel downward through gravity because it has no velocity at that point.
Most likely.
Did you do any calculations as to nutrient loading off of the patio?
don't understand that question. What nutrient loading from the patio?
Okay, nutrients fall from the sky, nitrogen, and they hit the patio with the rainwater. And nutrients accumulate on the surface of the patio, get washed with the stormwater. Where do they go?
So if you've seen the site, I mean, the patio was pitched to the rear where there's supposed to be a planting bed that hasn't been installed because everything had to stop, but the vegetation typically would absorb or provide new nitrogen renovation, certainly, and other amongst other things. So if this plan was completed, as we've proposed, there's quite a bit of vegetation, sod, bushes, plants that would provide nutrient and water absorption.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions for these witnesses. I'd like to move on to my experts and ask them a few questions, but thank you, sir.
Certainly.
So I'd like to call Mr. Sonicson. You could unmute yourself. All right.
Good evening. I think I'm unmuted.
Thank you, sir. Could you remind the commission of who you are, just briefly?
Yeah, my name's Rob Sonicson. I'm a registered professional engineer, the state of Connecticut. I work at Waldo and Associates in Guilford, and I have 45 years of experience, primarily in hydraulics and hydrology. And I've appeared before the Branford Wetlands Commission many times in the past, and I'm a former wetlands commissioner in the town of Madison.
Thank you, sir. Did you see the site plan that was pulled up earlier on the screen during this proceeding?
Yes, I did.
And have you seen that site plan before?
I've seen it. I saw it when it was submitted.
Okay. And do you see the spot elevations on it?
Yes, the spot elevations are elevations that are taken from the base map. The base map for the proposed plans, I believe, or I'm certain, was the existing conditions map, which came with a set of drawings as sheet 1 of 2.
Okay. Do the spot elevations tell you anything about the slope of the patio about at the corner of the house, the back corner of the house at 38?
Yeah, the yard always had a section that pitched toward 34 Howard Avenue, or actually quite a large amount of the site pitched toward Howard Avenue. A lot of it was toward the rear of the deck, in the rear corner, and then down the slope. But there still is, based on the proposed conditions plan, a pitch toward the toward 34 Howard Avenue, and some pitch still does go down toward the northwest corner of the site at 38 Howard Avenue, but then discharges in sort of the general direction of both down gradient toward the wetland and also somewhat side gradient across the corner of 34 Howard Avenue.
Okay. Mr. Sonicson, based on what you know of the site from the photographs you saw today and your knowledge of what the wall looks like today, and what you heard from Mr. Preddy, what is your analysis tell you about what happens to the stormwater, what that falls on the patio?
Mr. Ainsworth, this is Commissioner Boda. I'm going to ask again, like I asked earlier, when we're talking about the maps or the plans, we can pause and just either have Mr. Sonicson, have Jamie pull it up. I know that we all have access to it in the Dropbox, but it's really super helpful if, for orientation purposes, if we're all looking at the same thing.
Okay. If I could share my screen, I can pull up some of these things.
Thank you.
Either that, or were you looking for the existing conditions to get pulled up, or
The existing conditions would be useful, yes.
or the plan that was submitted by Sonicson?
Well, we've got we've got two plans in play, and so you know, I have comments on what has previously been the proposed plan, and then I have also some comments on the what is now apparently the proposed plan, which was called the alternate plan previously.
Okay,
So
Mr.
which one should
Sonicson,
I pull up for now?
why don't we look at the alternate plan first? Because I think we'll start with the one that's preferred.
Flow toward north.
Okay, Mr. Sonicson, do you see the plans?
Yes.
So what are your comments on this plan as it relates to stormwater control and also just good design?
One of the comments that I have about both of the plans is that there's a lot of overstrike in the area along the retaining wall between 34 and 38 Howard Avenue. And one of the real challenges is trying to get a good handle on how much the wall is going to be lowered, where it is going to be lowered. There's some notes on the plans that say the wall will be reduced as necessary, but in my professional opinion, we really should have details along that wall. The wall is between 2 and 3 feet from the foundation wall of the house at 34 Howard Avenue, and that's a very small distance, and you know, we really need some specificity as far as what's going to be the final elevation, how much the wall is going to be removed. And I don't see that on either of the design drawings. Some of them are better than this. The alternative plan is actually better than the proposed plan, but that was a concern that I had as I was studying these drawings, and have been for a period of time. One point that I'd like to make is there's a significant difference between the two plans, and that is that this plan says portion of existing retaining wall encroachment to be relocated approximately 25 feet. The previously proposed plan said this section of the retaining wall is to be retained. So we've got that's a change between the two plans that I noted, and I just wanted to make that clear that this is the first time that the applicant is asking for permission to work on or remove material that had previously been placed on 34 Howard Avenue. And I think that that's of significance in the plan. I think that there was also discussion. One of the things that we saw very early on were photographs of the land between the house on 34 Howard Avenue and the current retaining wall. We showed pictures before the wall had been built, and there was a significant amount of soil in that area that was removed from the property at 34 Howard Avenue during the course of construction of the retaining wall. So not only was there an encroachment of a portion of the wall, but there was actually excavation done, a significant amount of excavation based on the information that we have. That was some of which was generated by my firm, because we also did a topographic survey and a property boundary survey. That was one of the first tasks that we were asked to accomplish. And we found that based on both the local GIS and the only existing conditions information that we have were after the wall was built. And so we had to look back to the Branford GIS to some extent, as well as photos that revealed that there was a lot of earth excavation in that area between, which cleared off the ledge and didn't allow the soil to do anything in terms of stormwater management in that area that it had been doing previously.
Okay. And Mr. Sonicson, did you do some additional topographical work in the front of the property?
Yes. At the last session of the hearing, there was a video that was shown of the front of the house at 34 Howard Avenue, which showed rainwater coming off before the gutter was placed on that section of the house. And the suggestion was made that could be contributing to some water that could be leaking into the basement. And in response to that, we went out and Waldo and Associates went out and did additional topographic survey in the front yard of 34 Howard Avenue. And that drawing is in the file. I think maybe we should pull that drawing up if we can, if we're talking about that issue right now.
Right, and this is the document that we're seeing now.
That's the document that you see. We did a very tight grid in the front yard, and what it shows without any doubt is that there's no tendency for any water that falls in the front yard at 34 Howard Avenue to flow around the corner and down the back along the side wall, where there's been an increase in stormwater leakage since the wall has been constructed. The grade goes right down towards Howard Avenue, down toward the southwest property corner where there's a grade elevation of 36.6. It grades up to over 39 at the house. It's a steady pitch that heads in that direction. And I think that addresses the fact that the rain that falls off the front of the house at 34 Howard Avenue does not flow to the north in the area between the wall and their basement wall.
So, Mr. Sonicson, thank you for that commentary, but let me sort of switch gears here and ask you a question about the retaining wall itself. There's a question of whether, the wall is exempt or not, and the town attorney quoted a situation where he said the retaining wall may not be a retaining wall because it can be replaced by soil or rock face slopes. Do you have an opinion as to whether or not this wall in this location on this ledge could be replaced by an earth or rock slope and still allow that patio to remain in place?
There's not enough room to be able to use that kind of a treatment, in my professional opinion. the only option really to keep the patio in place, the only option really is to use a vertical wall.
So the retaining wall is actually necessary to have this particular patio structure in place.
Yes.
All right. I'd like to, do you have further comments that you wanted to make before I move to Mr. Ashatino?
I think those are the extent of my comments.
Okay, then I'd like to move on. I think I'd, like to keep it moving.
Thank you.
But sorry to cut you off, but we're all trying to move.
It's nothing new.
Frederick and the wetland agent, do you mind if I interrupt with a quick question?
Absolutely.
I would just like for the applicant to clarify in regards to something that was pointed out where it calls out portion of existing retaining wall encroachment to be relocated approximately 25 plus or minus linear feet. Is that in fact being proposed by this alternate plan, or is that a typo? I know it was stressed at the beginning of the application process that all activity was confined to 38 Howard Ave.
Jim Preddy, again, that may be me overstepping a bit, but it will have to eventually obviously be removed at some point. I don't know when, but that's just me indicating that it will have to be relocated.
This is Marjorie Shansky. It was not the intention to expand the scope of the application beyond 34 Howard. So in the event that this hearing goes into a continuance, we'll make sure that that is marked properly.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So moving on to Mr. Ashatino.
I'm here.
Oh, thank you, sir. Okay. Now, you heard the conversation with Mr. Preddy regarding the infiltration of stormwater. Do you have any comments regarding where you believe the stormwater goes after it hits the patio?
Yes. I mean, Mr. Preddy has an indication that somehow the water behind this wall is going to be retained like a pool. All the testimony has been, and there's been photographs showing that they supposedly put trap rock behind these walls. And trap rock doesn't have a tendency to retain water. So the water would flow very rapidly down. And really the only place that the water can go, originally before the patio was there, you had some ledge and you had a lot of soil. So the water, and it was a much steeper slope going towards wetlands. That water will either flow down towards the wetlands or seep into the grounds. Now what's happening is it's flowing down through the stone, and it's the easiest way to get out is to get through these cracks, these fissures, crevices between ledge, which seem to be, based on the photographs we've looked at, they tend to come on an angle from 38 straight towards the foundation wall of 34. So if all that water that either seeps through the pavement, if we're assuming that the pavement is permeable, it's going to get into the crushed stone, and the crushed stone is not going to hold it. The wall is not going to hold it because the wall is, Mr. Brown also testified, is nothing else but a loose block, and it's got big holes in it. So the water either goes down through the joints of the pavement, or it gets to the wall and it goes down in the back of the wall through the gravels, or and then when it reaches the surface of the stone, it's going to flow. I mean, the ledge is going to flow to whatever there are, features in the rock. And right now, the way that that site is made, it looks like there are at least two major fissures that are seen in the photographs. And I don't know if you want to pull one up so we can quickly take a look at it. Probably if we look at this photograph, prior to this patio being built, you had a tendency for that water to flow back towards the wetlands and slightly towards 34. But by the time it got to 34, it was going past the corner of the house. If you see that corner of the 34, where the deck is, there's a 2x, kind of nailed to the deck. You see these two large ledgers that are in between the fence and the house. That became a barrier. So water, any surface water would flow sort of back and towards beyond the property of the foundation of 34. Now, with the wall being built, and I believe they removed a couple of the rocks on site, you have these sort of fissures, those crevices between the ledge, the kind of slices into the ledge that trap the water, gets behind the wall, it goes down in the gravel, and then it flows between these solid pieces of rock, which are split with these crevices. And those crevices happen to be going straight into the basement of 34. So the water, the reason why there's been, a much larger amount of water getting into that basement as a result of this is because now the water is flowing down into the gravel, getting in between the rocks, following these crevices, which are, water wants to travel, and so gravity pushes it. And then, the soil underneath that patio, if it's gravel, it has no tendency to retain it because of, there's so much, voids in the stone, and the stone is made to allow water to flow through, so not to be retained. But all that water is getting into the rock, between the rocks, and it's flowing towards 34 and some of it towards the rear of the property.
So let me ask you a question. If they were stockpiling all the soil, you can see there's grass on top of the ledge in various places. If they were stockpiling that elsewhere and then sort of put that on the surface as topsoil, and they had filled this with gravel, is there going to be any kind of remediation of the stormwater in that location, or is it just going to go straight down?
Now, before that, with that grass that you see, that was soil that was retaining and the water. That surface water was being retained, and whatever wasn't being retained in a very heavy storm, it would probably flow down to the wetlands. By stripping all that out and by replacing with gravel, what you're doing is you're using gravel as a channel to bring the water down to the ledge and letting it flow straight over the surface of the ledge and between the cracks of the ledge.
Would that reduce the
amount of crevices, which tend to lead towards 34?
And would that tend to reduce the remediation of the of any contaminants or nutrients in the stormwaters?
I am not an expert on that, but I definitely, if you're not slowing down the flow and you're not using soil to retain it, it definitely is going to flow with the water.
Then maybe I should ask
Commissioner Basserman, could you, by the way, state for the record your background, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Rafael Escatino. I'm with Escatino Associates. I'm a civil engineer. I practice structural engineering for about 45 years. And I have designed at least, multiple dozens of these walls over the years.
And all right, thank you. So I'd actually like to ask them that last question to Mr. Sonicson again. Mr. Sonicson, if you could unmute yourself. Are you there?
I am.
Okay. Now, Mr. Sonicson, you are a hydrologist, are you not?
I'm a civil engineer. My specialty is hydrology and hydraulics.
Okay. So you have experience in hydrology.
Yes.
Okay. And so did you hear the question I asked Mr. Ascatino about the remediation of nutrients and contaminants in the stormwater after stockpiling the soil and using it as topsoil?
I think that going back to some testimony that Mr. Preddy had before, vegetation, and this is also something that Bob Russo is probably more qualified to speak to than I am because of his professional qualifications and background. But plants do an effective jobs of nutrient take up And paved surfaces don't do anything with regard to nutrient take-up. So that's one of the natural sort of best management practices is increasing the amount of vegetation in a site development. In this case, there was a lot of removal of previously vegetated lawn area, which then isn't as effective in nutrient removal.
All right. And so then I'd like to then, thank you, sir, for covering that. And then I'd like to switch over to Mr. Russo. If you can unmute yourself and introduce your, a brief identification of your qualifications.
Sure. My name is Bob Russo. I'm a certified soil scientist with CLA Engineers in Norwich, Connecticut. I've been out on the site, the 34, address number 34 site a couple times, and have viewed that and number 38 from the number 34 property. I'd like to make a couple comments, Attorney Ainsworth, if I could, just to start with.
Yeah, I think, for expediting the matter,
sure.
Just get right to your points.
I'd ask Jamie Frederick to please pull up, it's Exhibit 10C, the Preddy photos. We've looked at them before, and I think they'll be a useful backdrop to my discussion. I'm going to start while you're pulling those up. Quick note by way of background. I do review of wetlands applications for several towns in Connecticut, both on an ongoing basis and under contract, and I've done hundreds of reviews of wetland applications. And the point that I want to make is that as we all know, as we've all been talking about, this activity, this wall and this patio were put in without an application to inland wetlands. It means that the commission didn't have the opportunity to see the site, to walk the site in its pre-existing condition. They didn't have the opportunity to hire their own experts. I know this commission at times will hire a soil scientist, will hire an engineer to review things. And those types of consulting staff are hired to assist the commission in determining whether or not there's going to be a wetland impact or what the potential for an impact is if there are activities in the upland review zone. The commission was denied that opportunity, and I think that's important here. And I think that while they can, they should still seize on that opportunity. I guess my comments are such that by not having the permit filed, by not being able to walk the site, by not getting professional input, should they have desired, they have a site that went from the picture that you see in front of you now, where there's some exposed bedrock, but there's soil and vegetation. And I'll now ask Jamie to scroll down through 2 photos of the patio as constructed. You have this, and if you could show the next photo as well, this. So these happened without proper process, without the commission being able to give fair consideration to what was being constructed. And I will just ask the commission members to think of the process by which an application is reviewed. You get to look at the plans, you get to look at the site, you get professional input, and almost invariably, the plans get revised. Suggestions come from town staff. Suggestions come from professionals that you have hired that make it a better plan, that make it less likely to impact wetlands. That didn't happen here. Now, again, if you could scroll up, Jamie, to the photo that shows, is looking from the backyard up the alley between the 2 houses. As was mentioned earlier, the pre-existing condition had vegetation, in places, soil, that are all responsible for renovating stormwater, for having more natural flow patterns. This commission specifically regulates activities in the upland review zone to try to minimize alteration of naturally occurring conditions to, and Jamie, if you could scroll back once more down to the patio, changing things from this diffuse flow to stormwater collection and management. This is a focus all over the state of Connecticut for your commissions, for all commissions, to minimize the amount of hard surface that's been built. It's my opinion that this commission would have likely requested alterations in this plan had they the opportunity to look at it. It's also my opinion that the commission could still require this to be removed and the applicant to start over again and give you your fair shot at considering the design of this site. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Actually, I think I would like to ask one more question of Mr. Sonicson about the wall regulations. Have you seen well, do you know that the applicant is claiming that the wall is exempt from the regulations? What do the regulations say with regard to whether a retaining wall has to be set back from the property line?
The way that the regulations are written, it says that walls over under 3 feet in height do not require a zoning permit. However, they go on to say all of these walls must be set back from the property line a distance twice their height. So I know that there's been I understand that there's been some correspondence with the zoning office about what their interpretation of the regulations are, but I don't believe that there has been a change in those regulations. And so in that case, the requirement, based on a strict reading of the wall regulations, is that all of the walls, regardless of height, have to be set back the requisite distance from the property line.
Yeah, and with regard to 6.8C number 3, does it not also say that any wall shall be set 6 feet away from any parking space?
Yes, that's part of the regulation, which is also has applicability, but I've focused primarily on the property line setback, which was
okay. But this, as part of this project, there's a driveway, and there's full access from that driveway back to the patio where the applicant has parked their car. If this were to be permitted, would you recommend that there be a limitation on parking within this patio area next to the wall?
Well, yes, I think that the setting the wall back will make it very a narrow driveway, which I think is a concern, and it would essentially make it hazardous to drive a car up into the backyard.
Okay, but if you, what's the reason for setting back a parking space from a retaining wall? From an engineering standpoint?
It's for safe maneuverability, and giving it's primarily for giving adequate maneuverability to a vehicle.
Okay. Does it have any element of keeping large, heavy objects away from the edge of the retaining wall?
Well, it's protecting the retaining wall as well as protecting, allowing the vehicle to maneuver and not impact the retaining wall.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I want to clarify for the commission that it sounds like the regulations being discussed are planning and zoning regulations.
Right.
And I know that town council had provided some information regarding this, and again, town council is on the call, so I think it would be appropriate to see if town council has anything additional to add on this matter in regards to the commission's jurisdiction.
Thanks,
I don't know.
Jamie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jamie. I did have occasion after the last hearing to inquire as to the interpretation that the Planning and Zoning Commission put on its regulations. As all the attorneys on the call know, the Planning and Zoning Commission has a responsibility to interpret its own regulations, and the courts give the commission fairly wide-ranging authority to make reasonable interpretations of the regulations. In 2015, I discovered through interactions with the town staff that the commission, and I want to clarify, Mr. Sonicson said the staff put an interpretation on it. That's not accurate. In 2015, and again in 2024, the commission discussed the interpretation of the definition of retaining wall, and at that time, it made a determination. In 2015, the consensus opinion of the commission members was that a wall with a height wall under its regulations. And that's important because, and I want to double back on this given what Mr. Sonicson has raised here, because if it's not a retaining wall, then it's possible the setback provision doesn't apply to it because it's not a wall, not a retaining wall. And that's a question I'm going to have to clarify for the commission after the meeting, and I will do that and provide the commission with whatever information I can get on that. I will also say that at the January 18th, 2024 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously to endorse that interpretation of the definition of retaining wall. So I want to be clear that this was not staff interpretation, but the commission's interpretation of its own regulations, and also that their consensus was with respect to what the term retaining wall means.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Attorney Yanukovych, can you repeat the planning and zoning's definition that they're using for retaining wall? Yeah, you're cutting out.
They were very clear that a wall under 3 feet was not. I don't, Chairman Basserman, I don't with the definition of retaining wall, whether or not a retaining wall that was lower than 3 feet was a retaining wall as it defined retaining wall in its regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, for a moment on this point.
I'm still not done, and you'll have your opportunity to rebut.
Hang on, Attorney Yanukovych. Go ahead, Attorney Shansky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Attorney Marjorie Shansky. In one of my letters to this commission, I recounted this narrative that Attorney Yanukovych has just described, and I appended to that letter Ms. Ellis's email with the definition and the minutes of the Planning and Zoning meeting from January 18th, 2024, which is available on YouTube and which I listened to the entirety of. It's not just that they voted unanimously. The chair polled each member who got to speak to the issue of the interpretation individually, and they voted unanimously that this is their interpretation. It has been their interpretation since 2015, and they will amend the regulations accordingly. I think that that is more persuasive than, with all due respect, the civil engineer with an emphasis on hydrology and hydraulics, the zoning enforcement officer and the Planning and Zoning Commission have made this interpretation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And
Go ahead, Attorney Yanukovych.
Yes, and in addition, but no, that's right. I just want to echo that in the email that I sent earlier today, the minutes and the ZEO memo is also attached to that email. So if members are looking for it, they can find it in both places.
Thank you. Okay, Attorney Ainsworth, you're back on.
so just briefly on that point, and just because we're building this record, the definition of retaining wall, as it's written, is a wall built to retain or support, and this I'm reading right from the regulations, a wall built to retain or support earth or other materials that are not part of a building or structure, utilized to provide changes in grade that, and here's what Attorney Yanukovych quoted, that cannot be accomplished with a stable earth or rock slope. And that was the reasoning that was used by the agency. Now, it flies in the face of the direct language, but if that's the reasoning, in this particular location, that is a retaining wall, because you can't put a earth slope that's 3 feet on the property line on sloping ledge and have it be stable, because that's the reason why a retaining wall might not be needed and might not be considered a retaining wall, is because it's a change in grade that, quote, cannot be accomplished with stable earth or rock slope. And you can't in this location. So in this context, that interpretation is incorrect. And the commission has not amended its regulations. The straight language as it was written says something different. And, obviously there's a differential of opinion here, but, that's a question of law that ought to be analyzed more carefully.
I couldn't agree with you more. We're going to, I think, not have any more comments regarding whether it's a retaining wall or not. I'm sure the councils will provide whatever they feel is appropriate for this consideration. So do we have anything else, Attorney Ainsworth?
Let me just make a... I'm just taking a look at my notes here. I think I'm about done. I guess finally, it's well known at this point that there is existing civil litigation on this matter, where this wall may be ordered to be altered by the court. I think it.
Yeah, we don't go outside the wetland and watercourse issues here.
Okay, I just think the context might be helpful to know and keep in mind when you're making a decision, so that it's not made in let's say, without understanding that there's other forces at play that are actually substantial.
We don't have regulations that allow us to consider things beyond wetlands and water. So does that conclude things?
Yes, sir. I mean, we just to conclude, the intervener still requests that this application be denied, and certainly that the alternative plan that leaves this thing right on the property line, crowds the flow of stormwater that goes between the houses. And I think you have insufficient information about what really existed here before. You were deprived of that, as Mr. Russo said, and they had a proper application, and there hadn't been a violation of law, that this project may have looked very different, or may have been altered or even denied. And to make the applicant start over from the beginning and give the commission the ability to look at the original conditions certainly would be well within your rights, and would be fair to the public, and especially my clients, but also because the wetlands, there were no soil and erosion control measures put in place when they took all the vegetation off the hillside. I think you might have had a comment about that at some point. They're saying, well, there's no erosion now that they've noticed, but there are other things that would have been taken into account that have already been violations. And I think there have been enough things that are irregular about this that might advise the commission to put a denial in here and say, start from scratch, come back to us with a proper plan designed by an engineer, and let us be able to look at this the way we would have had we not been deprived of that by frankly an illegal act. And the applicant's own contractor has said, I was doing one thing and then I did another. It morphed and there was no plan for it. It was drafted on the back of a piece of paper as a sketch by someone who wasn't a professional. And I just think there's enough irregularities here that suggest that perhaps this is one that should be a denial. But thank you.
All right, it is now 10 o'clock. Certainly the public has been very patient
Jamie,
at this point.
in the
Jamie, you got
wetland.
a comment?
I just want to remind you, there are 2 other interveners. I don't know if they're present, but you should offer them the ability to talk before opening it up to the full general public.
On that note, I see Mr. Holt, you have your hand raised. Are you one of the interveners? No. Who is an intervener that is on the call?
I'm not sure that they're here.
Jamie, may I speak?
Yeah.
I know where the other interveners are, so I just wanted to share about that. One of the interveners had a family emergency and couldn't come. And then the other intervener, Lisa Licio, said that we could share that she is not currently in support of the application.
Okay. And that's it. So now I guess we can go to the public. Mr. Holt.
Thank you, Commissioner. My wife and I have been very interested in properties in this part of Branford. We've been watching these proceedings with great interest after learning about them through various news resources. We now know that this might very much determine our decision to purchase in Branford. I have walked the neighborhood numerous times with our agent, and we have seen very clearly the difference in the wetlands that this property change has made. If it's not clear from the Wall A exhibit to the final wall that was built, which is conveniently called a patio, which we all know is a driveway to a driveway for their Mercedes E classes. Those are the facts that we have. So the fact that they have not been, this project has not been done with proper permits, and we're now reviewing them post hoc, is very concerning to me as someone who might purchase in the neighborhood. Clearly, the property does change the ingress to the wetlands. So I hope this will be taken into account. Thank you.
Anybody else? Let's see. Attorney Walsh, you had your hand raised.
I did. Just very quickly, just to say a couple things. We have submitted to the commission all of the reports from the soil scientist. Every soil scientist who has submitted has indicated that there is no impact by virtue of this particular activity and this conduct. And every side has had an opportunity to weigh in with respect to their soil scientist, and that there is no disagreement on that. Number one. Number two, I just thought I'd very quickly address a comment with respect to the fact that permits weren't pulled. You know, this is all meant to be a prospective exercise. We wish it was not retrospective, but this is why from the last hearing we provided someone today to speak to the structural integrity of the particular walls, because it was a question about how it was built, et cetera. So we've provided to you someone I think of great pedigree and great respect. And by the way, no one tonight has indicated that Charles Brown's opinions are wrong. No one's indicated that Charles Brown does not have basis to make his opinions, or that he's not qualified to offer opinions concerning the quality of and the characteristic of the particular area. I'd also just very quickly indicate that I understand that, you know, if things were done differently, that there might have been comment. But again, looking prospectively, there is no impact to the wetland by virtue of the soil scientist reports that we've generated. There's been the only water study that's been done in this particular case was done by Mr. Preddy. No other party has attempted to do a water study or provided this agency with any water study with respect to water, how it leaves the patio, doing a calculation. That was the calculations and the math and the science were only provided by Mr. Preddy. And the last thing is there's been some comment about denuding the area between the two houses and how that somehow affected the water flow perhaps. But I'd like to, Mr. Preddy has a photograph available just very quickly. This shows the condition of the area between the properties at the time the wall was completed. There was grass, there was soil, there was weeds. That's how it looked. Okay. So and this is for another day in a different forum in terms of our evidence of videotape showing that area being cleaned and cleared out by the Nori contractors. This is how the property was when the wall was built. There were weeds, there was grass, it was coverage, all that was there when the wall was built. I know that there's been an indication that, that we took stuff out of there. If you compare this to the photograph before the wall was there, you'll see it is in substantially the same condition in terms of the presence of soils in this photograph. It speaks volumes. I know that there's information that's not relevant to this matter about the civil case, and we'll take care of that in the civil case with respect to the removal of those and the work that was done, et cetera, on the Nori side of the equation. So, I'm sorry to speak so quickly there, but I want to address it really quickly. That again, the question is the impact to the wetlands. That's the focus of this particular inquiry, and I would hope that we've satisfied it. If the commission thinks that you need additional information, we want to give it to you. We want to satisfy your inquiry, and if there's questions about the application or what we might do, we strive to provide information to answer those particular questions. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I apologize it's taken so long.
Thank you. Mr. Russo, you had your hand raised.
Real quick, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, please submit that photo for the file.
Jim will.
Mr. Russo?
Yes, my question is with regard to that photo. I had not seen it before. Is it my understanding that it had not been previously submitted?
That's what it sounds like.
That is correct.
Could we bring that photo up and zoom in on it, please? Is it possible to zoom in and focus on the area between the house and the wall? Thank you. Right there. That's great. If we examine the photo more closely, we'll see that the weeds are up at the very beginning of the wall and that the area between the wall and the house is denuded of soil and weeds. I just want this matter to be correct. Thank you.
And if I may just respond quickly, those same stones we see that are shown on the top of the arrow is right now the cursor. We see those stones when there was no wall. There's a fence and you can see the top of those very same stones in the other photograph before the wall was built. In terms of the vegetation and soil here, there's as much or more at this particular point than before the wall was built, as reflected in the pre-wall photograph. Thank you so much.
This is Bob Russo. I am a soil scientist. I have experience in botany. I've walked the site and I've viewed the pictures. That's simply not true. There was a great deal more soil and vegetation present before the wall was built than is shown in this picture. I have absolutely no doubt of that. Thank you.
The commission has the photographs. They can look for themselves. We have the before and after. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Commissioner
Raphael?
Commissioner Goklowski, there was a picture showing on day one of construction that they had a heavy excavator in there pulling out rock. And I'm just under the impression that excavator was actually pulling out ledge along the side of the property. And that was provided to, and that's in our Dropbox, those pictures, I believe.
Yeah, I've never seen a picture of an excavator removing the ledge because the ledge itself is a monumental stone. It runs under the yard of 34 and then into the foundation, under the house of 34 and also the backyard of 38. But obviously whatever exists, and we defer to the photographs and the commissioner's recollection. Thank you.
Mr. Raphael?
Yes, if I may offer, Raphael Esquino, I'm the structural engineer who's consultant with the Norries. My opinion regarding Mr. Walsh's comment that Mr. Brown supposedly has concluded that the wall was constructed correctly. Frankly, I mean, I've been in business as long as Mr. Brown, and based on the information that was shown on those two photographs, in my opinion, that's not enough evidence to anyone, any engineer, to really, really, frankly, make a determination that a wall was constructed properly. As Mr. Brown submitted a document stamped and signed saying that in his opinion, that the wall is structurally sound, or is it just a vague opinion presented at this meeting?
Mr. Brown is available.
Yeah, I don't see him on the screen.
Well, is there a document from Mr. Brown, a letter of opinion stamped and signed stating that that wall is structurally sound that complies with the building code? If it was, he should have submitted it.
Yeah, and we don't have any opinion from you, sir, saying signed also that it was not. What we have is the opinion of, he's given us the basis of his opinion, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to argue, but he was here to provide his pedigree, and whether he can provide an opinion in this regard, he was given that information. Again, I would leave it to the commission to determine whether or not they believe that that's adequate. If they would like a report from him, by all means, we'll get him to put that in writing. And I'd be happy to. If that request is made, Mr. Brown would be, I'm sure, happy to put that in writing, to putting exactly what he said tonight on a piece of paper. But once again, and again, I would encourage, just make the request, or I'll volunteer to do it, frankly, to have him do that. But as a practical matter, again, we've responded to the concerns of the Inland Wetlands Commission. And I will get a hold of Mr. Brown and ask for that to be submitted after the hearing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz-Romero.
Hi, this is Sophia Nori and Stephen Diaz-Romero from 34 Howard. I know this has been a really long proceeding. I also want to thank the applicant for bringing the contractor and for sharing more about how the wall was built. It did take 11 months to finally get some more details about how the wall was built. I appreciate hearing at least something, even though it's been 11 months. I will say, though, that unfortunately, I do think the application is still missing multiple components. I mean, we've heard from multiple professionals, and I still don't quite understand their explanations for how the wall drains, nor have we seen like an adequate drainage plan. There are frankly just, contradictions that don't quite make sense. Like, they're saying that there's storage of water behind the wall, then they're saying it seeps directly through. They're saying it's better for the wetlands to not pull the wall back on our property line, but then they're saying it's completely easy to move 25 feet of it back when that's encroaching on our property, which is also on the property line. They have not shared exactly what has to happen on our side, even if they lower the wall, because again, the wall they're proposing is still on our property line. And they have made, comments about our gutters. They've made comments about us removing the soil in the side yard between the two houses, which is an upland review area. And again, our contractor is actually also, was on the call last time and already said he did not remove it. And the person who removed it already told us that he did remove it. So I just want to clarify that. Again, just want to say we unfortunately cannot support this application because we still don't understand the drainage and multiple components of the wall. And any wall we believe that is going to be there needs to be set back from the property line. It's the largest feature along the brook. It also, walls will fail at some point, right? And we want it to be set back from the property line because in the event of failure, we don't want it to also take out structures on our property and have those collapse into the wetland as well. And we would appreciate a stipulation that cars would not be parked on the retaining wall because I haven't heard anything about the strength of the retaining wall being able to support a car as well. And I would hate for anything to also, again, fall into the brook or not follow the stipulations of the wetlands. And again, this is about future impact. It's not just about existing impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner
I would-
Goklowski, I just want to point out one thing for the commission. If they go to file 45 photos with captions from Dunn Landscaping, and if they blow up the picture, they will see that there's a worker with a heavy piece of equipment going into the ground, tying up a strap to probably pull something out of the ground. So that's what these are the pictures that were provided to us, and I'm only reviewing them now. So, and if you
That's
blow
a
that
fence
up,
post. He's pulling out a fence post.
That's a fence post.
what fence post? From the metal? He needed an excavator to pull out a fence post. Those didn't look like they were deeply in there.
Jim Preddy, Crisco Engineering, Mr. Dunn's not responding, so I will. He is clearly putting a strap around one of the fence posts that they were removing. And you can see somebody in the background prepping the next one.
So they're below the upland review area. Okay.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent Chairman, do you want to see if there's any more members of the public that wish to speak? Or
I see no hands raised.
I do not either.
I think at the beginning of this public hearing, you mentioned the time frame that we're under, Jamie. It doesn't sound like we're going to get a resolution this evening. Does this require an extension?
Yes, Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. It would require an extension. It does kind of sound like the applicant would be willing to grant one, given the fact that they've indicated they'd be willing to supply supplemental information and revised plans if the review was continued. So I certainly think that the commission may want to see that information that has been requested and offered. Some of the things that I wrote down were the report from the structural engineer Brown, clarification from town council regarding the retaining wall. Might be nice to offer the applicant and interveners a chance to respond to that information. Details for revising the wall, final elevation proposed, access, and whether or not there'd be any activity required on 34 Howard Ave. So I think it wasn't directly requested, but I think kind of consistent with the commission's past practice, a project narrative of how the activity would be completed might be helpful. And one of the points that has been raised, I think, at the previous section of hearing and this evening is the amount of information regarding the proposed condition beyond just reduced to 3 feet or general comments like that. And then also the clarification on the section of retaining wall and whether that's being relocated or if that's a future project, not part of this application. And then another thing that has kind of been danced around but hasn't been directly answered or directly asked, and I think I'm just going to bring it up just to make sure it doesn't become a question at the next hearing if this is in fact continued, would be whether or not the commission feels that test pits are needed to get a better understanding of what material is underneath the patio and behind the retaining wall. I think that highlights the big things.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, in this case, do we need a formal vote of the commission as
Mr.
to the
Chairman.
extension or not?
You have to request that of the applicant and determine when the hearing would be continued to make sure that the extension is an appropriate amount of time.
Mr. Chairman.
Does Commissioner Basserman, does any commissioner feel that the extension is not warranted? Okay, in that case,
Mr.
yes,
Chairman.
yes, I was about to get to you.
Thank you. This is Attorney Marjorie Shansky. I appreciate this opportunity. I just want to make a couple of comments and noting that the list that Jamie has just given us is the predicate for this extension or continuance. But I want to say that this evening has been marked by a substantial amount of speculation, and nothing that has been said this evening contradicts the findings of 3 soil scientists that there has been no evidence of sedimentation or erosion on the hillside or adverse impact to the wetland. And from a 2019 perspective, the petition to intervene has failed because there has not been established the reasonable likelihood of unreasonable pollution to natural resources of the state of Connecticut within the jurisdiction of this body. And the failure to establish that impact, there's nothing been quantified. There's been some discussion about nutrients on a very small segment of land, but there's nothing quantified. There's nothing that's been aligned with a specific adverse impact. And it has been testified previously by Mr. Davison that it is the segment of wetlands, the revealed daylighted segment of the wetlands at the McCabe Watts property that is the most protected and highest quality of the surrounding wetlands because it has a riparian buffer as opposed to the neighbor across who mows directly to it or the neighbor who has it piped. So your jurisdiction, and I understand there are a plethora of other things that we're talking about, some of which are within your jurisdiction, but many of which are not, and that the adverse impact issue has never been refuted. So I leave that with you to ruminate over. And the amount of speculation that this or that might happen is not evidence. Riverbend is the citation. So yes, we'll be happy to consent to an extension. I would wonder if the commission would be willing to have a special meeting in a closer horizon than its next meeting. But I respect that we've taken a lot of the commission's time and leave it to the commission.
Thank you, Attorney Shansky. Jamie, I guess what does our agenda look like for the 11th, which I think is our next scheduled meeting?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Yes, the April 11th is the next meeting. There's a lot of things that were tabled from this meeting and to be discussed at the April 11th meeting, to knowing that this meeting had a lot to be discussed. So I would say that it's already pretty full.
And if we, let's see, go 2 weeks past the 11th, that'd be the 25th. Would that be our next
Correct.
meeting after the 11th?
That'd be the next regularly scheduled meeting after the 11th.
Given the amount of information that has been requested, is it more prudent to push this out the 4 weeks instead of the 2? Also, given the size of the agenda that already exists for the 11th?
I think that's a kind of for the commission to decide. The applicant did request a special meeting. I understand that we're already meeting twice a month now rather than the once a month. So adding a third meeting to that month, I'm not sure. how that works for a lot of commissioners, given that you're all volunteers. What else?
Yeah, personally,
one-
Commissioner Bassman, I think it's either got to be the 11th or the 25th. I can't imagine trying to squeeze another meeting in that's going to likely go late again.
One thing I just want to clarify is so test pits have not been requested. Again, I'm not trying to say that they're necessarily necessary or not necessary, but is that one of the things the commission's expecting to have in for the next meeting? Because that might play into the amount of time needed to respond. And certainly it plays into whether or not, there needs to be that activity on site or should be that activity on site.
I guess, this Commissioner Bassman, any commissioner want to address their need for test pits?
Commissioner Ormrod, if I may, just there's a lot of there's several things that I haven't been convinced of that we have asked. That I don't know how we can get this information, but I mean there are a few points. We know there's been rebar drilled into the bedrock. Nobody ever said how deep was that installed and whether or how deep that needs to be installed for something of this nature. There's no indication of how the drainage, how water percolates through the patio, through the material underneath the patio, and then into the bedrock joints and cracks, and where that goes. And I do agree with Commissioner Goklowski. It looks like there are large blocks of what appear to be bedrock that was taken and set aside. It looks like there's steps in the photos. So I think I don't know if test pits would get us that information, but there's still a lot of questions in my mind that I'm not really convinced of yet.
Mr. Chairman, would it be possible for the commission to commit its questions to a writing? Because the questions just expressed would have been very nice to have asked while Mr. Dunn was here. So we'll be happy to get answers to questions, but we need to know what those questions are.
With all due, Commissioner Goklowski, with all due respect, Attorney Shansky, every time you have come before this commission, something has changed in the plans that you keep adding or subtracting or wanting to change. Maybe you should sit down and have a clear-cut application filed with us with the proper documentation so we can review it, and maybe we wouldn't have these questions. And then, again, if your client did what they were supposed to do in the first place, we wouldn't be sitting here right now asking for these types of tests, because this is what we do when we get an application and they're doing it properly.
Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, you had read off the questions that were in your mind still outstanding or needing to get addressed as a result of today's discussion. I believe the test pit question was raised at the previous public hearing, was it not?
It was raised, but I don't think it was ever resulted. So that's what I'm wondering is, does the commission want test pits to be completed or not? Because if so, obviously it would make sense to allow the applicant to move forward with that activity now so that it will be available the next time the commission reconvenes. If the commission thinks it's unnecessary disturbance, then, obviously it doesn't make sense to make them do the work.
I guess I assume that, this Commissioner Bassman, I assume that if we're going to do test pits in the patio, they were going to be removing some of the blocks, some of the pavers or whatever the material is, and digging one or more test pits. That may be the only way to address the issue of whether the soil is retaining water or whether it's flowing through the soil material. And I'd hate to, quite frankly, get a bunch of questions answered when that's still outstanding if we don't add that to the information that the commission needs, so that we can once and for all determine the likelihood that water is going to move through that material or not. So I guess I would vote for yes, a test pit. And I guess the question is, where are the other commissioners on this?
Commissioner Goklowski, I agree with Commissioner Bassman.
Anybody else? Well, given how many commissioners are on the call, two ain't going to get it done.
I'll weigh in here as Commissioner Ormrod. I think test pits would give us a little more information about some of the things we need clarified. I don't know if it's going to get us all the way there. I don't know if we can, because this is after the fact. I don't know if we can definitively find out the answers to these questions that we have. Yeah, test pits might help, but I don't really see them as being the end all to be all in getting down to this. I'll just put it out there. I guess I think Mr. Russo made some really good points regarding the fact that we were denied the opportunity to evaluate whether a regulated activity would have an impact to the wetlands, and it's really difficult to know whether or not the pre-existing conditions. There obviously was a significant change in the conditions prior to this wall and this patio being built. I don't see any other way. I don't know. I think I don't see any other way of understanding whether or not this activity had an impact to the wetlands without removing the entire structure, restoring it to what it was as best as it could be, and then seeing the effects of the restoration and seeing what that does. That's where I'm at.
Commissioner Begeman, any thoughts?
Yes, I'm more inclined to go along with what this is Commissioner Begeman, with what Commissioner Ormrod is saying. I don't know if taking part of it seems like we keep on going piecemeal. If we take something away from this project and to do test pits, what does that do to whatever structural integrity of the structure is there now? So I don't see a way out of this other than which sounds horrible to do when something has already been built, but I don't really see a way out of this other than denying the permit. That's what I'm thinking right now. Even if because the evidence that has been shown or that the applicants are showing, which is that nothing has happened to the wetlands after this structure has been built, we still don't know. And a lot of information about whether it will continue to function that way. So that's where I'm thinking right now. but I'm not ready to make a motion to go that way.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
And the question of test pits then?
So yeah, I'm not opposed to doing test pits. I don't know what they'll get us, but if others think it's important, then I would go along with that.
Okay, so just kind of, I mean, so everyone, sounds like everyone still wants more information, still considering, you know, what information you need, the merits of the application, the challenges, keeping an open mind. Sounds like the commission is not requiring test pits, but providing authorization should the applicant decide they want to do test pits to go ahead and do them. Is that a fair way to summarize what the commission has kind of?
Just Commissioner Papantonis, I think we've gotten a lot of information. The applicant and the interveners have had a lot of opportunity to respond and to make their arguments. I'm ready to close the hearing personally, and I don't know if test pits are going to make a difference or not.
Well, it doesn't, this Commissioner Basser, it doesn't sound like there's a huge amount of support for test pits at this point, I would say, Jamie. So at least on that issue,
no test.
I guess we don't have to consider that in our timing.
So, I mean, the public hearing hasn't been closed at this point. It sounds
Right.
like there's at least some commissioners that think that they would benefit from having additional information. I think there's certainly some things on the record that could be clarified, whether or not it's going to answer all the questions commissioners have. Can't say, but you know, the applicant has indicated they'd be willing to grant an extension and provide additional information. So, you know, I don't know if the commission wants to move forward with continuing the public hearing to see that additional information.
Marjorie Shansky here, if I may. I would simply say that as a simple matter of procedural due process, it is the commission that has articulated an interest in this information, and we are willing to provide it and want to provide it in order to have you have everything you need to make a decision.
Thank you. I guess the question is, Commissioner Bassman, the question is the 11th too soon for that, or do we need to tee it up for the 25th?
If that question is thrown in my direction, Mr. Chairman, it sounded like the 11th is pretty full on your agenda, so it might be auspicious to put it on the second meeting of the month.
Any commissioner have an issue with the 25th of April as the continuation of this public hearing?
Commissioner Goklowski, no problem.
Commissioner Ormrod, Jamie, this might be a question for you. If I'm out of state during that date, can I still be seated and attend via Zoom?
Yeah, Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. As long as you can connect via Zoom, that's one of the nice things about this format. You don't have to be in Branford.
Thank you. Then yes, that date works with me.
And Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, would the applicant be willing to just shoot an email over documenting the consent to an extension to the April 25th meeting?
Of course.
And this Commissioner Rossman, Jamie, so that we also keep the record flowing here, maybe a email to the applicant regarding the questions that you read off 10 minutes ago as being the kinds of things that the commission is looking for would help the record and provide direction for the applicant.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. Yeah, I'll certainly review my notes and send something out next week. We're closed tomorrow, so I'll get something out with things that I could pick out from the meeting.
This is Commissioner Begmont. There was a question that came up that was never answered about whether where the pinning is to the ledge and how continuous is it and whether there are gaps. And if there's any way to get that information, that would be good.
Okay. We don't need a formal vote for the continuance, Jamie?
Just an announcement that it will be continued to the April 25th, 2024 meeting, which will be held remotely via Zoom.
So public hearing on inland wetland 240102 38 Howard Avenue is going to be continued until April 25th at 7 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Does anybody need a break? 5-minute break? Or do we want to just continue?
I need 5 minutes. This is Kate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jamie,
5 minutes, guys.
the wetland agent, can we just say it's
Sorry?
fair to table the next two items so that anyone that's still here for those can leave and not sit around for the 5 minutes? Given that a lot of people have just signed off, and the next two items pertaining to 34 and 38 Howard Ave.
Don't we need to discuss those tonight?
They can be tabled if the commission so chooses, and I think it'd be appropriate given everyone, all the parties signing off and past practice.
Yeah, I think Peter already walked away. So.
No, I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
I just want to make people sit through. Okay, so yeah, recess if you want. 5 minutes.
So it's let's 38, maybe make it 7 minutes. 10:45. We'll reconvene.